but I recognise the impact that it has on people here in the UK, and so it is important. Shall we just wait until they've gone? I had a sandwich.
Nigel Farage! You are Nigel!
Oh, I didn't know what the politics was, but now I do.
We've got British flags on and we're going to get arrested! We've got English flags on here, Rachel, we're going to get arrested! Look at Rachel Reeves there with a smile on her face. You're ruining the country, get to be a down or else. What's the British flag?
I love our country. I love our country. I love our country, and one of the things about our country is good manners. It's not very British. Right, very good. You can put that on the telly. Right. Today I can announce that we'll be extending the freeze on fuel duty all the way through until the end of the year. Given what's happening in the Middle East, it is important that we now provide certainty. This war is not a war that we started, it's not a war that we joined, but it is having an impact on people here in the UK. And despite the decline in inflation that we've seen in the numbers that have just come out, I obviously recognise the challenges that families and businesses are facing, and so we're keeping that freeze in place until the end of this year. This is not a war that we started, it's not a war that we entered, and it is a war that we are trying to de-escalate, because that is the best way to get prices down for consumers. But obviously we'll continue to keep a close eye on what is happening to petrol prices, to gas prices through the duration of this conflict. But what I can announce today is that fuel duty freeze will continue until the end of the year. The plans that I inherited when I became Chancellor would have seen that fuel duty rise almost straight away. That wasn't the right decision, and what is happening in the Middle East today means it is important that we keep that freeze in fuel duty until the end of the year. Well, the numbers today for inflation show that inflation fell in April to 2.8%. That was a bigger fall than economists had been expecting, but it reflects the measures that I took last year in my budget. £150 off of people's energy bills, freezing prescription charges for the second year in a row, freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years. And because of the actions that I took, we're one of the few countries in the world that is seeing 2 months after the escalation of violence in the Middle East, inflation actually coming down. And the measures that I'm taking today add to what I did in the budget last year to try and keep prices down for families and also for businesses. Well, because of the actions that I took last November in my budget, we saw in April the fuel bills for people in their homes come down by £150 because of the actions that I have taken, and because of the growth that we're seeing in our economy, the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first quarter of this year. We're also able to take measures like ensuring that we can keep prescription charges frozen, keep rail fares frozen. All of that puts money back in people's pockets. I recognise that these are challenging times for families, for businesses and pensioners. And as Chancellor, the measures that I've taken, whether it's money off energy bills or today's commitment to freeze fuel duty until the end of the year, is all about helping families, businesses and pensioners with the cost of living.
Do you worry that...
Do you want to do this HTVs thing? Because I don't think we got that answer before.
Okay. The pushing back on sanctions with Russia and the cost of diesel and jet fuel, do you think Putin will welcome that?
We've introduced today some of the toughest measures and the toughest sanctions that Russia has ever seen, and tougher than pretty much any country around the world. Today we've introduced new sanctions, but as a segue to those new sanctions, there are a couple of specific licences that we are enabling to continue. That is normal practice. That's what the Conservatives did when they introduced sanctions. Is we welcomed it when they did it because it is the right approach. But be in no doubt, the sanctions that we have increased today are the toughest sanctions that any government in this country has ever put on Russia.
The HUV?
Sean, that's what... Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In addition to the freeze-in fuel duty to the end of the year, we're also putting in additional help for HGV drivers, for farmers, and also for rail transport. It's important that we do those things because we know that the cost of diesel and red diesel have increased especially, and we recognise that farmers and haulage businesses are intense users of diesel, and so it's important that we're putting extra support for them as well. Okay? Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Well, look, she said that she'll be reducing the price of things like dried fruit, chocolate bars and peanuts and things like that. I'm sure every little helps a little bit, but it's not going to make a huge difference to the way people feel about the kind of pressures that they're under at the moment. And these pressures have arrived because of the decisions that the Chancellor took. She put up taxes, particularly on businesses, which stoked inflation, slowed the economy, borrowed a lot of money, which has stoked inflation as well. And we've ended up in a very weak and fragile position, just as we're going into additional pressures now because of the Middle East and an increase in oil and gas prices.
And it does seem like this is about feel. The Chancellor said that she's looking to tackle cost of living and allow Brits to enjoy their summer. Do you think this is going to cheer people up?
Well, I don't think it's going to make a massive difference if a packet of peanuts is a bit cheaper or a chocolate bar's slightly cheaper than it would otherwise have been. We had the highest inflation in the G7 just last year, and that is because of her policies, including taxing businesses in an eye-watering way. Some of that gets passed on by way of higher prices, and also borrowing vast amounts of money, spending a lot of money, which has stoked inflation. That's part of the real story of what's going on here.
So people are struggling right now. If you were in her position, how would you cheer people up? How would you give people a good summer?
So we need to get energy prices down in particular. We have a cheap power plan, which means getting those carbon taxes, those green subsidies out of people's electricity bills. We could reduce bills by about 20% through doing that, not just for households, but also for businesses who are struggling as well at the moment. And North Sea oil, we should be getting that oil and gas out of the North Sea, not restricting it through not granting licenses and the heavy tax rates that they're putting through at the moment.
So it's being reported that the Treasury's had a lot of backlash from the private sector, and they're asking supermarkets to voluntarily cap some of their prices. The accusation that this is sort of state control, do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, it feels like what was going on in the 1960s and 70s, trying to control prices. So the man or woman in Whitehall is sitting there apparently deciding what the price of eggs, bread and milk should be. It's utterly absurd. What that kind of approach leads to is shortages on the shelves. It also means a lot of pressure on the businesses that are supplying those products, okay, squeezing their margins down as well in turn, right the way back to the farm gate and our struggling farmers. It's the wrong approach.